Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by Michael Weiss. He's coming back for a second time. He is in Las Vegas and he is running in District 3. The election is actually next Tuesday on the 12th. So we definitely need everyone in Vegas or Nevada as a whole to get out to the polls. So thank you so much for joining me again, Michael. I appreciate it.
Great to be here, Joy, and thank you for having me on one more time before the primary. 8 days left. 8 days left.
Yeah, it's exciting. RP does not endorse candidates. Real Progressives does not as a whole. However, I've interviewed about 80 candidates, and I have personally endorsed 6 of them, and Michael happens to be one of them.
Yay.
You take someone special, so you're just an awesome person.
Well, thank you so very much for your endorsement. And also, thank you to you and Real Progressives, for giving me, a platform where I can reach people, where I can, tell people about, me and my platform. I think you guys were the first, you may have been the first interview period.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you guys were a huge help for me just by, bringing me on here and letting me say what I have to say. So I'm very grateful for that in so many ways.
Absolutely. I'm proud to do what I do. I love that. You are actually, a lot of the reason why you've been making waves initially is because you are the first openly autistic candidate. So can you describe how that's affected your run? If you think it's the candidates are, intimidated by that, or how that's going?
Well, believe it or not, the novelty of my campaign, or me as a candidate, has not gotten a whole lot of attention in the mainstream media. And that's been something of a disappointment, because even though I'm not running as the Asperger candidate, I'm running as a candidate, with Asperger's on the autistic spectrum, my hope was, and maybe, it'll still happen, that my story would inspire people who, haven't run before, who've been told that they couldn't run, that they couldn't do it, that they could never win, to come out. I know for me, personally, this has been a tremendous growing experience for me. I have more confidence in myself. I feel, overall that, I'm a better person. And in the beginning of this campaign, we had doubts. We had doubts about, should I even go public with this? Do I have the ability to, get through a campaign? And here we are 8 days before the primary, and I did it. I overcame, some personal odds, some, political odds, and all that. And I don't know if my opponents are necessarily intimidated in any fact. I mean, nobody has attacked me for being on the spectrum. And that one thing that's been interesting is, I've been trolled many times online, but nobody, right or left or whatever, has dared bring that up. And I think, even for, I hope at this point, that, attacking a political candidate for, a difference of disability or, whatever would be, shunned on the left or the right. But then I also think, well, Trump mocked a disabled reporter, and and that didn't affect him at all, which I found, incredibly disturbing. And, I look forward, if I make it to DC, to having one-on-one chat with Trump's perception on the disabled.
That would be tell me when I have the popcorn. That would be phenomenal. The interesting thing is you did a panel. The video was sent to me the other day because I have great viewers who, if I have candidates on, they'll send me updates of videos or articles to keep me privy, and somebody sent me a video of your a clip of your panel you did a few days ago, and they asked you and your opponents who was your favorite president. Mm-hmm. I can tell you just from that answer alone, you are the only progressive. I can tell you that. I was a little disturbed by the answers of the others.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that was covered in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And
really?
if you look, and just a brief article. And the author of that was live tweeting at the time. And what she said was correct, that I had chosen Teddy Roosevelt in my question. But what she forgot to mention was that, I had said FDR in concurrence with another candidate in there, and then gave Teddy Roosevelt an honorable mention. Not a disaster or anything. I mean, as I had mentioned, in my answer with Teddy Roosevelt, the ultimate trust buster, we owe a lot, to his, banking reforms, and, his reforms to, breaking up monopolies. And, we got the the Food and Drug Administration under him, and, the protection of our lands, very environmentalist, the founder of the original, Progressive Party. And I did get a little irked because, she didn't say the whole thing that I said. But, maybe she ran out of characters in her tweet. Because I did, yes. I mean, for me, the Roosevelts are, my two favorite presidents. I mean, they did so much for this country.
And two of your opponents actually said Obama, which is pretty neoliberal of them.
I think Obama, and we'll see this, I think Obama is going to be looked back on history as someone who did, decent, in certain areas relating to domestic policy, and not so great of a record on foreign policy. And there is no denying that, the number of armed conflicts that we had, just multiplied and, spawned, during his administration. And, and, we're seeing, now potentially more disastrous foreign policy decisions being made by our current president.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a scary situation. Your opponents, you're going against 4 Democrats, correct?
Well, actually, only 4 Democrats showed up in that forum. There's actually 7 in the entire primary. One of them was sick, and one of them I'm not sure of completely. And the other one, I think, had a prior commitment. And that other one is the establishment Democrat that I'm running. That's my main opponent.
Yeah, and I don't expect you to say anything because you're as the candidate expecting, hoping for votes. You don't have to respond. But as someone who's been following your race, there's one guy. His name is Steve Schiffman, or something like that.
He's been on the show. Dr. Firestone.
Yeah, he did. That guy, I probably would not vote for personally. I'm not a fan. I think he's running in the wrong party. I think he should be in the Republicans. So yeah, I'm not a fan, and I really don't expect him to do well either. So I'm kind of I'm hoping he doesn't get a lot of votes, to be quite honest.
He did run in 2016, and he got it also in District 3. I think he got about 1,000 votes, not too much. In 2016, the candidate, the winner of that election, Jackie Rosens, won with like 60+% of the vote. He didn't make a difference in any way, shape, or form. I think what I have found is very frustrating about him is actually similar to the frustration I have seen with Susie Lee. And that is, I'm really not sure what they stand for in that regard. And I think in this political climate, people are expecting that they have at least some idea of what the candidates that they're voting for stand for. I mean, we still have, issues with, issues involving, voters not having information that ideally they would have before casting their vote. But what I've done, and this separates me from, my opponents, is like, if you go on my webpage, if you go on my Facebook page, I make it very clear about what I stand for. I make it very clear about, what I'm going to do. You look a little deeper. I make it clear what bills I'm going to sign. And I'll tell you, not everybody likes me. I've gotten, a fair amount of hater comments. But I have also gotten comments, or messages like this, saying like, I'm not going to vote for you. I don't like anything you stand for, but thank you for being honest. And I think that in and of itself will likely make a difference in our race. The lack of ambiguity that there has been with my candidacy and the amount of transparency that has been with our campaign.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things about Republicans that kind of make me less scared of them, because they're actually unabashedly assholes, whereas Democrats trying to hide it a lot. So yeah, I mean, you're transparent. To me, I'd rather someone be honest and transparent than agree with them 100%. So absolutely. So you were a teacher, is that correct?
I was a teaching associate / part-time lecturer at the University of Miami. I've not taught at the K through 12 level, but I taught for several years at the college level while I was getting my master's and beyond. And I've taught sociology and criminology.
That's awesome. And I could be wrong because I've interviewed so many people, but weren't you a Bernie delegate as well?
Yes, and here's another thing that distinguishes me from my opponents, and that is I am the only person in that race, in the CD3 race, that was a precinct captain, that was a volunteer for Bernie, a precinct captain for Bernie, a county delegate for Bernie, a state delegate for Bernie, and came very, very close to being a national delegate for Bernie. So I was on the Bernie bandwagon very, very, very early. And I stuck with him, throughout his campaign, and I'm still with him now. I hope, that one of the things, that I'm hopeful for, if I, do win the primary and continue this race, that I'll get to meet him and then tell him how grateful I am for all that he's done and what a huge inspiration he's been to me.
Hopefully you won't forget your name like I did. Yeah, that was interesting. So as far as your platform, you do have a lot of the, the progressive platform ideas. You do want universal health care. Can you explain why that's on your platform and why you're passionate about that?
Well, on a personal level, this goes back to my being on the autism spectrum, and I could, drain the entire interview right now, the time on the interview, telling you, the horror stories that I have had dealing with health insurance and finding an adequate doctor and the right medications and all that. And the process, I saw, the damage that the bureaucracy, the overhead, with processing insurance was doing, to me and to, my friends and family and all of that. And I knew, at a young age, like there has to be a better way to do this. I had known about systems like Canada, but at the time that Canada uses, but at the time that I was growing up, like the mainstream media was like so anti-single payer And a lot of the time that was spent on critiquing our healthcare was like, well, we actually have the best healthcare system in the world. And yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're okay with, having millions and millions of people die for not having health insurance, then it's fantastic. And going back to Bernie, it really wasn't until him, and he put it together like so clearly for me in terms of why a single payer system would work, that I, jumped on board. I mean, I'll admit, I thought the ACA was the best that we could possibly do when it was first introduced, and perhaps adding the public option might be sufficient, which Joe Lieberman killed. But when I learned about a single payer from how Bernie described, I was like, this is the answer. We could save, and I've seen estimates, ranging from $200 billion to even $1 trillion. And so it's like, not only when I hear people say, like, how are you going to pay for a single payer healthcare system? It practically pays for itself. You kill off the overhead from, that private insurers create, and you allow our government to negotiate drug prices for drugs. Every other industrialized country does it. Every other country that's like us does that. But we don't allow our government to negotiate drug prices because who's filling our politicians' pockets? The pharmaceutical industry, among others. So what has been keeping, I feel, this more humanitarian, cost-effective way of delivering, healthcare goes back to money in politics. So I don't want to see people suffer the way that I suffered when I was younger, going through our healthcare system. I'm fortunate now, I've got very good, health insurance through my employer, but not everybody has that luxury. And that's why, as a big part of my campaign, I am an advocate for a single payer system, because it is the only system that we have that can guarantee medical care as a human right.
Absolutely. Right on. And you actually, on that note, you do not accept corporate donations, nope. Which any progressive should know that is the number one thing that everything comes back to. So what made you decide not to take anything except, smaller donations from We the People?
Well, here's an analogy that I have used. Let's say you're a little kid and, your parents are trying to get you to do something, and they say, bribe you, they tell you, we'll give you, this, we'll give you a toy, we'll give you some money or whatever, but they're going to expect something in return. Do a chore or, something of that nature. Well, now put that on a grander scale. Does anybody really believe that, these PACs, that are, being, filled up with millions of dollars for a candidate, does anybody think that the people that are paying, putting this amount of money into the PAC are going to expect something from who that PAC money is going to? I mean, perhaps, these individuals may be writing the legislation that the candidate or the person's going to, promote if they go, if they make it to Congress. And effectively, like, I knew going into this that if I went the establishment route, I would have had to sacrifice, for me, I would have had to sacrifice, my identity, my honesty, my integrity. And I've said this, from the beginning, like, it would have effectively resulted in me selling my soul. That platform that you see, on my website, on my Facebook page, would never have been put out. I mean, would the pharmaceutical industry really give me any money and then say, oh, by the way, we're okay with you having, a Medicare for all single payer system. Don't worry, we're going to give you plenty of money. Or would the for-profit predatory colleges, say, oh, we're okay with your free public college tuition. Yeah, no problem. What I've been fortunate about is, the small donors that have donated to me, they're doing it because they believe in, what I stand for. They, see that, they see my platform, say, I want to support this guy, and I'm not looking to change him. But I can tell you, and we have seen this with politicians, that have been, outside of the mainstream, outside of the establishment, being, brought in some way, shape, or form, and then, propped up and pumped up with money, and whatever integrity that they had at that point, whatever positive, people-centered policies they may have been advocating, gone. And so, to summarize, I didn't take corporate money because I didn't want to sell my soul. I wanted to, be able to look the people right in the eye and say, this is what I stand for, and nobody's pulling my strings, and I'm nobody's puppet.
Absolutely. Right on. It seems like I always my head always goes to Cory Booker for some reason. Like when Byrne came out with that legislation to put a cap on pharmaceutical prices, and here's Cory Booker, and so many of us, myself included, at that point had thought he was a progressive. Oh, and now he turns it down. But guess what? We research, he takes tons of money from, big pharma. And it was at that moment that I was like, holy shit, like even people who we think are so-called progressives, you got to research, and you find out a lot of times that what they say doesn't mean shit because their actions are showing something totally different. So absolutely right on.
That's going to come back to, if he runs for president, that's going to come back to haunt him.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And voting for the $700 billion war budget increase with his friends Kamala and Elizabeth Warren, three so-called progressive heroes. So yeah, those are other things. People throw around this word progressive, and it needs to be thought about more seriously before we throw it at someone. And I've definitely learned this interviewing so many candidates. You also did touch on free college. I know that you had several degrees. So what would, how different would your life, your family's life, your friends' lives, how different would they be if they didn't have to get loans and pay interest and all of those things?
Oh, so much better, so much easier. I keep hearing, these stories, about kids, defaulting on their loans and, not being able to pay, their student loans. And I get worried now because debtors' prisons are making a comeback. So, it's like we now have an economy where in order to compete, in order to have, the really good jobs, you have to have a degree. For most, it can be, anywhere, sometimes it's just, a 2-year degree, other times a 4-year degree or whatnot. And, years ago, we decided that a K through 12 education, should be a right to all of our citizens. And it made sense when we did that because a certain amount of education at that point was essential to be able to, compete and get a good job, compete in the marketplace and, have a good job. Well, now things have changed. And what frustrates me is, again, in the same way, revising our healthcare system, the letting everybody, go to college that wants to is effectively a beneficial in and of itself, in that you get people, the education they need to get a good job. They make ideally, they make, higher wages, higher salaries, and, then they pay, in a fair system, higher taxes. So it's a perfect example of how when we invest in our population, ultimately it's beneficial for everybody. And I mean, as I've said with healthcare, education is very much a human right. I don't want to see anybody ever punished, financially, for pursuing in good faith in education. And we have the ability to send everybody to college. We put a $1.5 trillion addition to the national debt with the GOP tax plan. We could have done with that $1.5 trillion. We could have canceled everybody's student debt. So don't let anybody, tell you we don't have, this money for anything that would benefit society. It's a total lie.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have the means to pay for anything on a federal level that anyone needs or desires through MMT. However, the interesting thing is also the powers that be also ignore the fact that if you have this loan debt, you can't get a home. So there goes the housing market. You would have more money to put into the economy. There would be less homelessness. There would be less defaulting on, rent. It's relative to everything. I mean, why don't we want a smarter society? I mean, I kind of do.
Well, I also think that there is this, and I have run into this during my campaign. There are two types of mentalities that I've noticed, and that is the first one, and it involves suffering. The first one goes something like this, which I am of, and that is, I have suffered, so I don't want to see anybody else suffer the way that I suffered. And then there's the other mentality of, I've suffered, so everybody else needs to suffer just like I did. And I think that one thing that we need to, not just on, a governmental level, but just also as a societal level, is just a basic respect for human rights and dignity. Just because, somebody did not go, through the same struggles that I went through, doesn't make, that person, any less deserving of fair treatment than me, and vice versa. We're all human beings, and we're all living under, the same government. And as such, we are deserving, of the same equal treatment from our government. But I think, I don't mean to sound Pollyanna-ish, about any of this, but I think, part of, healing our society begins with just begins with treating each other with some level of respect. And I think, I think that I remember seeing somebody on a radio show talking about Bernie's, having a platform of empathy and love. And he said something to the extent of, it's very concerning to me that there's so many people out there that don't want a platform of empathy and love.
Absolutely. I made a post like that the other day. There was only one 2016 candidate who said the words love, humanity, compassion, empathy, sympathy, humanity. Like, why was there only one person who said those things? And I often think about that. Like, if Congress had, an attitude other than, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't give a shit. If they had a different way of thinking, our whole country would change. And a lot of Americans as a whole think that way. They don't care about anything until it affects them personally. And then all of a sudden, they become the spokesperson. Yeah. And we can't wait until something affects us. We have to start caring now. So you have been a huge advocate for LGBTQ rights, huge. And I saw your post today. You posted this, something similar to pretty much almost everyone is posting on Facebook about what happened today. Why don't you explain what happened today in your words, and also how it made you feel?
So the Supreme Court basically, from a legal perspective, punted on this case. There's a lot of headlines that have said, they ruled in favor of the baker that refused to bake a cake for the gay couple. But actually, what they did was they said that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission didn't give the baker a fair hearing. So they didn't really rule on this. I mean, essentially, they threw it back. But effectively, they refused to settle the question. And I had moderate hopes in terms of like where they might go with this. I didn't expect them to do this, but they have essentially they have left the question of whether religious bigotry, religious liberty, when used to discriminate against people, is legal. And one thing I was really worried about was if they had completely ruled in favor of the baker, then that would have given legitimacy to Trump's initiatives with the Health and Human Services, which basically would say, if you're giving medical care, but you object, on religious grounds to a person's lifestyle, then you can refuse them medical care. And, when that came out, a couple months ago, people were pointing out that, like, under this type of, scenario, somebody, a man, could be, nearby his dying husband, and the EMT can refuse to resuscitate the other guy because of religious liberty. And I think that, I think, the religious liberty of, defense is, for what it is. It's total, bigotry. It's being used to justify discrimination. It's being used to, justify, maltreatment of, certain, individuals and groups. It is not, it is not, it is not, allowed. That sort of practice is not allowed by the First Amendment, regardless of what, some highly conservative people, have said. And the court took no position on it. I don't remember what Ruth Bader Ginsburg dissent on this was. She's my favorite Supreme Court justice. She's so intelligent and so brilliant, with her rulings. And, especially, when she dissents, she makes it very, very clear, why she thinks, the ruling was wrong. But the decision was 7-2. So I don't know, what the long-term consequences of this are. I presume that another case is going to reach the Supreme Court again, with this type of question. And right now, I don't really trust this court to necessarily rule in favor of civil rights, of human rights. And that's why I also put in my post the need for the Equality Act, which would amend the Civil Rights Act to basically say you cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And if I make it to D.C., I intend to sign that bill.
Absolutely. And one of the first things I saw that you did, even I was researching before you came on the first time, you were at a town hall type thing and you spoke about trans rights. And for a heterosexual, candidate, I was impressed with how much passion you spoke with. So do you want to kind of describe what made you speak up and the way you feel about what they're going through right now?
Certainly. So I have been a huge proponent of LGBTQ rights since I was 16. My mother, when I was that age, came out of the closet, and she's been with her partner now for about 20 years. I guess, even at a young age, like, I didn't understand, like, why would anybody have that much hatred over somebody else's lifestyle choice, identity, orientation, whatever, that doesn't affect them. And as I, went through, as I grew up in my life, we go back again to, being on the autism spectrum, I was treated very differently, than other kids. I was bullied. I was ridiculed. And adults, even told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. And even though obviously, there's a difference, between being on the spectrum and being transgender, I have, a level of empathy for, what transgender individuals go through, because, they are, and right now of the entire LGBT community, they are, they're being targeted, in the most insane ways. And I don't want to repeat, the vile things that some of the parents who were in opposition to the gender guidelines said. It was to the point, like, they thought these, that these, trans kids were animals. And I went to, every hearing that I could, and ultimately the Clark County School District did, move forward with implementing those guidelines. And again, just going back to, like, I've suffered and I don't want to see other people suffer, especially, for people who are just, being who they are, having their, own identity. And it, with regards to, with regards to, things like, the bathrooms and all that, like, the Republicans created a problem with, like, the bathroom bills that did not exist, before, but they did it for political, they did it for political gain. And unfortunately for them, it worked. And it is disgusting, that we have politicians that are trying to divide people, trying to divide, groups, make people hate each other for political gain.
Absolutely. And then military as well. Trump started that. So you are good enough to risk your life to fight for our country, but they want to check your genitalia first, basically.
And I've met a number of, trans men and trans women, during, my campaign, who have served this country honorably. And I'm everlastingly grateful, that they have, been brave enough, and capable, of all that, to serve this country. Because I could never do it. Because of my diagnosis, I was disqualified at the age of 10. So I've always had respect, for anybody that, is willing to, serve honorably and put their lives on the line. And, frankly, I don't care, what's your, sexual orientation, gender identity, male, female, black, white, whatever. If you are willing to serve this country honorably, I salute you.
Absolutely. I mean, some people claim bone spurs and don't go at all. So yeah, oh my God.
He really put his foot in his mouth with the bone spurs.
He did. Yes, whoever just commented for Real Progressives, definitely any Nevada Bernie-crats watching, or really anyone, please share this stream. Please share Michael's website with anyone, because they vote in 8 days, and this is huge. Should you win the primary and the general, you get to DC. What is the number one thing you want to focus on right away?
Well, I'll tell you this. The first bill that I'm going to co-sign is HR 676, Medicare for All. And I'm going to do, that'll be my first thing. And then among, the other bills I'm going to sign, I'd mentioned the Equality Act. I also intend to sign HR 1227, which is the descheduling of marijuana at the federal level. And that'll tell Jeff Sessions to stay the hell out of my state. I would also, speaking of Jeff Sessions staying the hell out of my state, hopefully we can revitalize the Clean Dream Act, and hopefully we can put a cap on ICE separating kids from their families. I mean, it is unbelievable the level of human rights and that have been violated, under this administration. And I also did a tweet, about Jeff Merkley. I guess he got they wouldn't let him go into a detention facility. Children should not be punished for the acts of their parents. Period. We don't lock, we don't lock children up whose parents, have committed some sort of crime, and that is effectively, what we're doing here. We are locking up innocent children who do not deserve to be locked up in any way, shape, or form. And I can only imagine what horrors are going on in there. So yeah, I would say right now. And the other hot button issue is we got to get the assault weapons ban in place. We've seen enough destruction, from this, from unregulated guns, not having any sort of background checks, or whatever, just being able to go in and buy an AR-15. We can do so much better than this. But again, these tragedies don't need to happen. But again, who's lining the pockets of our politicians? The NRA, which, by the way, they gave me an F rating. And that was great because I've been telling the NRA to go F themselves for quite some time, and they gave me an F rating. So I'm very proud of that.
Yes. Well, and also speaking of immigrants, do you have a lot of immigrants in your district?
We do. We actually do have a fair number of, I believe I want to say it's a 15% Hispanic population, some native born, some who came here. And I don't know the number of undocumented. I don't know the number of dreamers, but yes, there are. There is a significant portion in District 3. District 3 is predominantly white, but we are, unlike some of our opponents, we're reaching out to all possible voters, all ages, all demographics, all walks of life. And one thing I can happily say is I've traveled to just about no, actually. I have traveled to every city in District 3, all the way starting at the north, with Las Vegas and over to Henderson, Boulder City, and all the way down to Laughlin. I have met some fantastic people throughout this campaign, and so many of them are tired of the status quo, and so many of them are demanding honesty and accountability from their politicians. And that's exactly the type of politician I intend to be. Well,
absolutely. And one thing that I love about you is you are an activist with your campaign. Yeah. I have met candidates who are like, I have great volunteers. Are you canvassing? Are you phone banking? It's not a given. So you do that. You door knock and you get out there and you speak with your constituents. That says a lot about a candidate. What do you? We actually have, like, my van. My RAV4 has become our campaign caravan. We actually have a table and materials, like, just in case we find some place that we could set up and talk to some voters. That's amazing. That is so awesome. And I do want to give your girlfriend a shout out. I see her in the comments and she is so amazing. And I love
you, Michelle. I love you so much. Couldn't have done any of this without you. You are awesome.
See the way they talk to each other? I can't even handle it. If my husband's watching, can you be okay, never mind. Take some hints. No, but you guys are so supportive of each other and you're so sweet and it's important. And I think that has helped you so much as well. And, it helps to have people supportive when you're devoting your life to something so big. But also, I was just going to, say, these things about the kids in the detention center and stuff, going back to what you were saying about the immigrants. why is it that people like you and I, without kids of our own, can understand the magnitude of what's going on? Um, but people, so many people, even with children, don't understand the severity.
Well, first of all, we are not in an administration. We are not part of an administration that you and I are not part of an administration that is effectively, in my opinion, run by sociopaths in many ways, shapes, or form. We actually, have the decency to, understand that, rather, intelligence to understand that, harming other people in any capacity is bad. And I honestly don't think that simple lesson, has gotten to this administration. And I see just so much, a lacking of empathy in, as you had said, individuals, who don't go through, who've not been through that experience, who've never had their child taken away from them. It's like they can't necessarily put themselves in the other person's situation. By the way, one of the stereotypes about being on the autism spectrum is a lack of empathy. And part of my campaign, has been to demonstrate I am no stereotype in that regard. So that's just, as a side note, I'm hoping that, part of my campaign is going to, show people that, being on the spectrum is not all negative. That people on the spectrum, can still do amazing things, that they can, empathize, and all that stuff. And I see that, lacking, in people that are not, on the spectrum, just don't have that level of empathy. And unfortunately, perhaps one of these days, we will be able to develop, some policies or some programs, or whatever. I mean, the argument that you can't legislate morality has been proven to be totally false. Even with the, racism, that we still see now, the bigotry, the homophobia and all that. When we passed the Civil Rights Act, we did see a decline, in the negative ways that people, treat each other, at least, on a one-on-one, level. So there are things we can do. There are things that we can do, to demonstrate that, even though that we're all different, we can all still, live in harmony in some way, shape, or form. But again, part of that, begins with understanding that we have differences, but those differences, should not, warrant, negative treatment from others.
Absolutely. If there is something you want to leave our viewers with so that they recommend you or share this or throw you a few dollars or, just hit up the people in Vegas to recommend you, what do you want to leave our viewers with? Well,
if you want to know more about me, you can go to www.weissfornevada.com. That's WEISSFORNEVADA. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Weiss for Nevada. I have no idea what the outcome of this election is going to be. The primary is going to be. No one does. But one thing that I would, say to anybody who is thinking of running for office, is running for office right now, is involved in activism, is involved, in some way to move this country into a more positive direction. Don't give up. We are, as progressives, we are on the right side of history. We have, a humanitarian, we have an agenda that is, based on, human rights, that is based on, civil rights. I have developed, a platform that is based on, social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice, which is what we stand for. And we can't let hate win. So I would, say one thing I would, leave all of you with is, I hope I will earn your vote. Whether or not, I win, whether or not, whatever, progressive candidate, wherever you are, wins or not, don't give up. The worst thing that we can do as progressives is stop making noise. Our voices, substantially got louder, thanks, largely to Bernie Sanders. And we can, keep this going. We can keep this going. We have the numbers. We have the power. And I am optimistic that there's going to be some surprises on primary day on June 12th, in Nevada, and in primaries, throughout this country. And I think we are going to be the ones that put a huge dent into Trump's agenda. And then in 2020, we're going to destroy him altogether.
I love it. This is why I feel like I should have moved in with you guys for a month just to establish residence so I could vote for you, and, and then I could just come back home.
Well, you are welcome. You're welcome to come visit anytime you like.
I told you it's gonna have to be when it's cooler, though. I can't do the heat.
It is really, really hot right now, and if there's any climate change deniers out there, please come out and stand in the heat just for a little while and see what you think.
Yeah, you would think Trump wouldn't deny it, considering he's got to be hot all the time since he's in hell. But
I would invite him down here to see how hot it is, but he would just look into the sun. I mean, what good would that do?
Yeah, all the orange would just kind of melt off of him. Creamsicle. So thank you guys so much for watching as usual. Please remember Tuesday, the 12th, a week from tomorrow, Vegas. As I said, I've interviewed about 80 candidates. I've actually endorsed personally 6. Michael is one of them. Amy Villela in Vegas is the other one. And tomorrow we have 8 primaries. Alabama, Iowa, Mississippi, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, New Mexico, and California. So if you guys are, just post to everyone. I don't give a shit where they are. Just post on your pages. There are 8 primaries tomorrow. There are more next Tuesday. Everyone who is a progressive or whatever you want to call it has the responsibility to get people like this in office. Because if not, I don't want to hear bitching and moaning if you sit on your ass. It's that simple. We have to do this. And F the lesser of two evils, F that shit. That didn't work. It didn't, So F that. Vote your heart. Vote for who the best person is. Vote for the person with your interests. And just get out there. For California, the 2 people I have personally endorsed are Stephen Jaffe and Gail McLaughlin. So if you're in California, absolutely, please vote for them tomorrow. They can change not just their, California, they can change a lot of shit for us across the states. I'm in Pennsylvania, so Vegas and California are not going to affect me directly, but I'll be damned if I'm not following those races 24/7. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Wednesday, I have a candidate named Patrick Nelson. He was a Bernie delegate. He's in New York, running in District 21. And Thursday, I have Congressman Ro Khanna coming back to discuss his new federal job guarantee plan and other things. So, and that will be at 1:30 p.m. Eastern at a special time because he's kind of busy. So again, thank you so much, Michael. I wish you the best. I have my fingers crossed for you. And regardless, you are an inspiration and you are freaking awesome.
Well, thank you so much, and the feeling is mutual. You are friggin' awesome too. And one last thing, everybody: vote wise, vote Weiss.
Absolutely. Right on. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Joy. Take care.
Bye.